My name is Vanessa. I'm a career counselor in the Career Development Center. And throughout the day, we've invited alumni to join us for conversations about their careers in order to give insight into different career paths, industries, and to really get advice on how to enter and thrive in these fields. So again, these sessions will be recorded and posted to YouTube. And our guest today is David Jackson Ambrose. Welcome, David.
Hello, thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So real quick, David Jackson Ambrose is a 2015 master's graduate in writing studies from SJU, and he just published a new novel called The Blind Eye. His debut novel, State of the Nation from 2018, was selected as a finalist for the 2019 Lambda Literary Award for Gay Fiction. In addition to his degree from St. Joe's, David also holds his undergraduate degree in Africana Studies from the University of Pennsylvania, as well as an MFA from Temple University. He also has over 20 years of experience working in social services, and we're so excited to welcome David back to Hawk Hill.
Thank you.
So I do have a list of 12 questions that I'm going to be asking you, and then followed by, about 10 to 15 minutes of a Q&A from our listeners. So audience, feel free to write your questions in the chat box that will be shared with our guests, during the Q&A at the end of the session. All right, so we can go ahead and get started. So we're going to begin with a series of career-focused questions. So David, I know that this is a little bit unique for you because of your publishing and your most recent work, right? But could you describe a little bit about your recent work as well as your current role and some of the core responsibilities there, and what a typical day or week might look like for you?
Well, it's actually I'm juggling two different identities, so I consider myself a writer now. With the experience that I gained from St. Joe's and Temple, I was able to publish my first novel. So I've been trying to juggle between the creative mind that I use when I'm writing my novels and also supporting myself during that time with the work that I do for the Department of Behavioral Health in Montgomery County, where I do performance management.
Awesome. And just real quick, could you give a brief overview of what you do in that role?
We have a contract with a managed care organization, and so we really kind of provide oversight to make sure that they're providing what they're supposed to for people in the county who receive any sort of mental health treatment. So I may also conduct audits at various providers at different levels of care, just to make sure that they adhere to state guidelines for performance.
Okay, awesome. Super interesting, juggling kind of, as you said, these two different, really different roles.
Yeah.
So again, this might be really, really unique to you, but when did you know that, writing was the career path that you wanted to pursue, and what led you to that decision?
I've always written, even when I was in high school, many moons ago, but moving into, adulthood and taking care of myself, working full time, I moved away from that. I didn't really seem to have time or wasn't able to find like a quiet space where I could envision stories. And so when I was able to go back to school, to undergrad school, suddenly I had a little more time and I was able to tap into that. So I started to take some writing classes and really enjoyed that. And so after I graduated from Penn, I wanted to study that more in depth. And so I entered the writing studies program at St. Joe's.
Awesome. And so this sort of goes along with that, but what is the typical kind of career path, we would say for someone entry level, within your organization, but really what does that career path look like for someone who's trying to get into the world of writing and publishing?
That seemed like maybe two different questions, right? So I'd say, or is it because I have this dual role? For entry level, for what I do with the Department of Mental Health, I mean, writing, you can always improve that with any, career that you choose. So that's always valuable. And I do think that it did enhance the skills that I use at that job. But also, with someone who wants to write for a living, there are many different ways to do that. I always wanted to be an author. So it really is just putting in the work to be creative and put something together. And then you have to move into submitting to publishing houses and or agents, and seeing, if someone is in alignment with what you've put out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So what has surprised you the most about your career so far? I know that's probably a loaded question.
Um, I guess maybe how circuitous it is, the road to publication. That's been a little surprising. And of course, you always have in your mind something that is going to be different than how it is in reality. And so what I was picturing, the road, I was picturing it to be a lot easier than what it turned out to be. There are a lot of steps to get from creating to publication.
Yeah. Could you give a little bit more detail about what those steps are like? And then maybe, was the process different from your first book to the second?
Yeah, well, you have to look at it as a business after you've created it, and you have to develop, a pitch letter or a query letter that you're going to submit. So you have to be able to succinctly encapsulate whatever you've created within 200 or 300 pages into like a paragraph, and hopefully, make it compelling enough to generate interest. And so that's been the challenge for me, trying to do that. And
Yeah.
then, once moving from there, then you have to move into marketing and how to get the word out and interest generated in your book if you are lucky enough to get published.
Interesting. Awesome. So now I want to shift gears a little bit to focus on, some actions that students can take. And again, I want to remind our listeners real quick to post any questions that you may have in the chat. And again, that's going to be shared during our Q&A. So I'm going to ask about, internships or just kind of those experiential learning experiences in a moment. But for now, what 2 or 3 experiences would you suggest that students engage in, while they're still in college to help prepare them for entering the field upon graduation?
Yeah, if you are able to, obtain an internship, that's going to be very helpful, in getting you familiar with whatever is involved with whatever line of work you're looking at, because you may come to the conclusion that it's not something that's for you before making a commitment to actual employment. I'd also say, enjoy everything that the university experience has to offer. I mean, it's invaluable. You're going to make connections there, or you can, and those connections can certainly help you as you move into employment. I think that's very important too.
Awesome. So I'm curious, how did you get your first job or internship in the writing world?
I didn't get one. I worked on my thesis at St. Joe's, and then I sort of continued it at Temple, and so I always wanted to. I knew I wanted to publish while I was at Temple. I actually had a very set goal while I was there. I wanted to actually write 2 novels and submit them while I was at Temple, but the program didn't really allow that flexibility. So I always kind of knew that what I wanted to do, even before I got into Temple. So I didn't really do any internships. And I guess I was lucky to get published so soon, because I hear that really the road is normally you do smaller writings and you submit to magazines so that you can get, build up a reputation. build up a platform and have, people familiar with your work, and that would help you to get a book contract. But I went the other route, and I'm going with independent publishing.
Okay. Could you go a little bit deeper into the differences between that independent publishing versus, you said, the other route of getting smaller things published first?
Um, well, there are very few of the big name publishing houses now left. So I think that there are a lot of independent publishers now that have proliferated now in that void. So there are a lot of upstarts out here who are more willing to put out work that's not necessarily as commercial, or that looks into marginalized communities. My writing focuses a lot on mental health and racial disparities, which are the things that I also studied. And so major publishing houses may not really consider that as something that's going to be commercial. The smaller houses will consider those sorts of things.
Okay, gotcha. And so now I know you mentioned that, when it came to writing, you didn't get necessarily internships or anything like that. That's not really how you started. But can you share, maybe one or two, interview tips or different kinds of tips that you have in terms of sort of, starting out in the field, or lessons that you learned as you were starting out?
Um, well, the game has changed a lot since when I was out interviewing, for the most part, because there's now social media and the internet, and those things have sort of changed the whole design of it. But I still think that it's kind of important, when you're interviewing, that you present your best self, meaning, you may not necessarily wear a tie, but you don't want to be too casual, depending on the field that you're going in. But those things are still looked at when you're interviewing. I still believe that a very important component of how I landed my job in the Office of Behavioral Health is I wore a suit and I wore a very good coat, and the people in the interview commented on the quality of the clothing. So I think that helped a lot. Despite, I had years of experience, I think that weighed in a lot.
Yeah, awesome. And so I know that two, keystones of your SJU education includes, social justice and ethics. How do you think that this has impacted, how you work, or the career decisions that you've made so far?
Um, we've experienced a global shift in the past couple of years, and quite honestly, it's made me reconsider, the work that I do in mental health.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think we've all just been really impacted by the things that we've seen, and related to police violence and Black Lives Matters. So those things have factored into the work that I do, and I'm always trying to be mindful of my preconceived notions or prejudices when I go in, and try to put them to the side, because I do still deal with individuals for the most part.
Awesome. And so again, I know that we talked about, the writing a lot, but now, shifting a little bit, to that full-time role. What types of internships should students try to secure, again, those kinds of experiential learning pieces to try to prepare for a role like yours in that industry?
Yeah, our offices bring on board interns every summer. So there's an opportunity to obtain a varied list of experiences, because we've got many different departments there. There's the Office of Aging and Adult. There's intellectual disabilities. There are a gamut of departments that you can enlist in and learn, during the course of a summer, what's involved in that various department. You could even, some of our interns hop from department to department, just to get a taste of what's involved in different departments.
Yeah, that's super interesting. All right, so as we come to a close for this portion, I do have just two final questions for you. I think this one's really interesting. What is something that you wish someone told you when you were in school?
Hmm. Uh, not to be as argumentative.
Gotcha.
I think that I did give a lot of pushback sometimes, and I was there to learn, so maybe I should have been a little bit more willing to absorb what was being told to me.
Okay, and what is a piece of advice you would give to students who are interested in this path?
Um, say, learn everything you can, get involved in as many of the extracurricular activities that are available. Try to uh, get involved in all of those things.
Awesome. All right, so thank you so much, David. So now we're going to transition to the Q&A portion of this session. So again, students, if you have a question, please either use the raise hand icon and I'll call on you. And then, when it's your turn, just let our guest know your name and your year at SJU. Or again, feel free to put your questions in the chat. And I believe we've already got a couple in the chat, so let's see. Okay, our first one for you. Did you have a literary agent? And do you recommend this or not?
Do I recommend having an agent? I don't have an agent. I did submit to many agents, but as I said, the focus there is for what's going to be commercial and make the most money, because agents, of course, want to be able to make, their percentage. But I would recommend getting one, because they will also advocate for you making more money, and they are able to help you market your product.
Okay, awesome. And when writing your novel, how often did you write on a daily basis? That's a good one.
Every day. I wrote every day. I allotted a specific time in the morning, so I would write like from 7 to 10 a.m.
Okay, great. Did you ever feel nervous or self-doubt when deciding to write a novel?
The nervousness probably came after it's published, when
Really?
when I had to read in front of people. The writing is a little raw sometimes. Like I said, I focus on marginalized communities, and so I try to bring that voice in. And so I'm very self-conscious when reading that in public. But while
Gotcha.
I'm writing it, I'm like, oh my God, you're a genius.
That's awesome. So is the publishing process time consuming while, maintaining your day job?
Yes, very. It's very time consuming, and it moves at a glacial pace. I mean, if you get your piece accepted, for example, it could, at minimum, it's going to take a year to get to print, and many times it takes longer than that. And if you're submitting your work, it can take 6 months to a year or even longer before you even hear back whether it's accepted or not. So that can be very frustrating as you're waiting for responses from others.
Interesting. And how do you balance your time and energy between the two? Could you speak to that a little bit?
It's a struggle.
I can imagine, right?
I think it helps if you have people in your corner. And also that's why I say, it's important to make those connections where you can, because those people can be very helpful in, restoring your energy when it's at a low point, or if you need someone to, read something you're not quite sure works, they can help you push through those things.
Awesome. Okay, another question in the chat. Could you give a brief overview of the Writing Studies Master's program at St. Joe's?
An overview? Well, I guess I would just say, for what I remember is that there are, workshops and writing challenges, which were very conducive to stimulating, my creative or my writing energy, which had been virtually missing before, but the classes are so exciting and challenging that it just stimulated. I had so many ideas. Once when I spoke at St. Joe's, someone asked me if I ever ran out of ideas. And at that time I would say absolutely not, because St. Joe's just stimulates, all kinds of ideas. It was a very rewarding experience.
Oh, that's great to hear. Um, so which of your novels has undergone the most revisions when you worked with editors? Which revisions were the hardest to do and why? And how do you make sure that your characters with disabilities are accurately and compassionately portrayed? There was a lot there.
It is always a challenge to wondering if I've done justice to people with disabilities, since I'm writing from the perspective of an outsider. So that's always a worry. And you never know until someone reads it and gives you feedback. I do think that A Blind Eye, I think that was probably the most difficult when it came to edits, because the editor had a different worldview than I do. So there'd be a certain pushback related to slang or certain word usage, or if I varied how one character pronounced the word throughout the book, the editor wanted it to be the same throughout. But for me, the usage would have varied, because that's how it's usually spoken in African American vernacular. So that was kind of a challenge.
Yeah, really interesting. Another one about the St. Joe's Master's Program. Do you recommend the SJU Writing Studies program?
I recommend it to everyone. It was the most rewarding university experience that I've had. Yeah.
Awesome. Again, great to hear. A writer we recently saw said she wrote her first book by the seat of her pants and then read a book about structuring a novel. Do you know the novel structure before you start writing it?
Well, sometimes I think that I do, but my characters usually take over. My first project ended up nothing like what I had envisioned. It was supposed to focus on the child Atlanta murders, and there was going to be a reporter who was delving into things that, a reporter of color who looked at things that most people were overlooking, but the characters sort of took over, and the Atlanta child murders sort of just became the backdrop for a different story.
Interesting. Okay, another one. How do you get opportunities to give lectures? How do you negotiate those deals?
Well, that's the benefit of having, an agent or a larger publishing house. They would arrange those things. For me, I do grunt work and submit, to any avenues that are brought to my attention. And I also research blogs and things like that, and make inquiries about whether I can make an appearance or submit something.
Okay. And do you hire an editor before submitting for publishing?
No, the publishers that I've used have done the editing for me. Yeah, I haven't really needed to do anything other than that.
Okay, awesome. Okay, and someone put in the chat David's next lecture with a link, so that's great. Do we have
Thank
any
you.
other questions? Again, feel free to unmute your mic and raise your hand and you can share, or just throw it in the chat.
I'd also like to mention that I have a new book that's coming out in June. It focuses on mental health and the police state apparatus. It's called Unlawful Disorder. I would like all of you to buy it and make me wealthy, and then I can, stop my day job. That would be wonderful.
Awesome, this is so exciting. What was the process of this new book like? And it seems like it's pretty recent considering you just published the last one, right?
Yeah. It was actually a distraction, because now that I knew how long it takes to get from submission to publication. I started writing it. I was thinking, oh, I'll just write a novella to distract me from how long I'm waiting for a response. So I'll just put together a 90-page novella.
Yeah.
And then it turned into 200 pages rather quickly, actually.
That's super, super interesting. So are you going through, the publishing process, and you said it was going to be out in June?
Yes, it will
Okay.
be out in June.
Awesome. Super, super exciting. Oh, we got another question. Where do we buy the book?
My publisher is Jaded Ibis Press, so it can be purchased on their website or Amazon or BarnesandNoble.com, or you can call any of your bookstores, preferably your independent bookstores, and make a request.
Awesome. Okay, and another question in the chat. How much did the publishing process cost you financially? She said, sorry if already answered.
How much? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that question.
Yeah, let's see. Feel free to put a couple more details in the chat. And then I see one more. Do you use different publishers for different novels?
I have used different publishers for different novels. My second publisher I found is primarily targeted towards romance novels with an LGBTQ+ slant, and my work is more literary fiction. So I thought that searching for a publisher who was more in line with what I'm doing might be more beneficial for me.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, awesome. Oh, we've got one more. Oh, reframing for Kelsey. Can you speak to the financial aspects of publishing in a small publishing house?
Yeah, small publishers, independent publishers, they don't have, the resources that the larger ones do. So if you are going to submit to an independent, unless it's one like say Gray Wolf, they've got tremendous resources available. But the smaller independent publishers have limited funding, and they're usually nonprofits. So you have to go in there knowing that most times very little is going to be devoted to marketing your book, because they don't really have finances to do that. You'll have to do a little more of the work yourself.
Gotcha. All right, any more questions? All right, let me see if I missed anything in the chat. I think we got them all. So again, while everyone's still thinking of any more questions, oh, we've got someone's hand raised. Feel free to unmute your mic. And feel free to unmute your mic and shout out your question. Oh, I can't unmute myself. All right, then feel free to put it in the chat.
I think I just did. David, do you have are you working on the fourth book?
I started a few months ago, and then I stopped.
Okay. Do you ever feel like you're gonna write some short stories, or do you just feel like the novel that's what you're called to do?
Yeah, I don't really feel like I'm good at short stories.
Neither was Toni Morrison, so all good.
So I don't know. It may happen, but I mean, because you never know what the creative spirit's going to do. So you never know.
Okay. You've got more questions in the chat, but thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, so you mentioned in the past that you applied for a fellowship to write a book. How did that come about?
Well, I just researched the fellowships and grants that are available and apply. That takes, up a tremendous amount of time too. But it's a tremendous opportunity to get funding, and also to get time away, usually secluded time, where you can write and also be around other writers. I do think that's a major thing that I'm suffering with now, that I'm not really connected to a community of writers, and I think I would really benefit from that.
Oh, and then it looks like a follow-up. Any place to go to look for fellowships?
There's a website that generally sends me things. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. Yeah, I can't recall. But if you go to your library, there's always resources there to show you the databases that have scholarships and grants available.
Yeah, really helpful. And another one in the chat, was there a specific book or author that inspired your love for writing?
Toni Morrison. I've read everything she's written, all her fiction. She's always been inspiring. I love the way she uses her words and weaves a tale. So I've always looked up to her. But I've also, I said this when I started at St. Joe's, I like to read the literary with the trashy. So I do read pulp fiction a lot as well.
Awesome. And one more, do you have any tips for aspiring writers?
Always make time for you to do what you love to do. The real world is always going to come crashing in, but you have to be protective of your time so that you're able to do it.
Awesome, really good advice. Okay, so again, I'm still looking for any more questions in the chat. And a shout out for the SJU Fellowships Office, awesome. All right, again, any other questions going once? We'll see if any others turn up. All right, so I'm not seeing anything, but again, David, any other final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I just want to thank everybody for taking time to listen to me and for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, again, everybody, please join me in thanking David so much for being with us today and providing such great insight into his career. David, we are so grateful for your time. We hope to see you back on Hawk Hill soon. And viewers, just a reminder again that this session was recorded and it will be available for viewing on YouTube in about a week. I hope you have a great day, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.